All right, welcome back to the Generation Z podcast. Today is episode 39, and today we're talking about changing your standards. So, we actually got this idea. Well, I got the idea for this podcast because I was just lying in bed the other night, woke up, just couldn't sleep, so I just went onto YouTube. Happened to come across a Tony Robbins video, started listening to that, and he was talking about changing your standards and self-limiting beliefs. And I thought this would be a pretty cool podcast. So that's kind of like the inspiration for it. And then me and Sam just added our own little bits to that as well. So before we get into today's podcast, if you do enjoy the podcast, then please do subscribe or follow us on whatever platform you're listening on. We do also have a YouTube channel, and we also have an Instagram as well if you want to check that out. But we'll jump straight into it. So basically, the first thing is who you are right now is the standards. It's due to the standards that you set yourself. All right. So we've said this a lot. Like, you are fully responsible. So if you're overweight, that's because the standards that you set yourself are the standards of an overweight person.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes on or is added on from what we talked about in a previous podcast, where it's like we talked about self-talk and the self-limiting beliefs that we have. Like, you are the product of the standards that you've set yourself, or the standards that you have set of yourself in the past. So as you said, with the person being obese example, the standards that they've set for themselves is that they are just eating an inadequate amount of food,
The
other way around, a lot of food,
Yeah.
and doing an inadequate amount of exercise.
Yeah.
So that has caused them to be the person that they are at that current moment. And unfortunately, most people only raise their standards when they're kind of forced to. So in situations where you're asked to do something, so say for example, you've got extra pressure for an exam.
Yeah, like
Deadlines. Some people only decide to do their exam the night before because they've been forced into a situation by themselves. Like, we've been there. A lot of university students have done that, where they've just like, I'll just put it off.
Yeah.
And until it gets to that point where you need to raise your standards, you then come through.
That's literally what Tony Robbins was speaking about. Like, you kind of get a glimpse of what you can actually do and you don't even realize it. So you might have a deadline due tomorrow and you do a 12-hour shift straight of work. And usually if somebody told you to do a 12-hour shift, you'd be like, nah, couldn't do that. Impossible.
Yeah.
But then you get it done. And the example he gave in his speech was like, if you're really tight on money and then your mum suddenly became ill and you had to afford her medical bills, you'd find a way to get that money. Before
diamonds are made under pressure.
But before you'd be like, oh, there's no way I can make any more money, but you find a way. So that's kind of like raising your standards. That's the whole idea of it. But basically, if you want to be someone or achieve something, then you've got to raise your standards to those of which would be expected of that kind of person. So if you wanted to be somebody in good shape, you'd raise your standards to meet those of a person in good physical condition. So you'd make working out a priority, you'd make tracking your nutrition priority, something like that. Or maybe in the business world, if you wanted a promotion, you need to raise your standards to meet that of the person who does that role. So maybe you currently you're not very organized at work, yet you want a promotion, or you need to be more organized. You need to kind of become that person that would be like operating in that job role, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's you can look at a lot of people out in the world that you see today, and you can kind of understand the standards that they've set of themselves. Like, the difference between the standards of a successful person and the standards of someone who is relatively unsuccessful. So say for example, like, they might be homeless. Obviously there may be like different circumstances that may have played a role, but overall they may have not been very good with their money. They may not be very good with their money. They may just have relatively low standards of themselves. But if you think about someone that is extremely successful, for example, like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, like footballers, Ronaldo, they set, you say, you hear the way that they speak about their work ethic and what they require of themselves. It's just completely different to like the average person. Like Ronaldo comes home from training and he's doing an extra like 2 hours on the bike as soon as he gets home. Like that, you can just see what it requires to be successful in that sort of similar field. And if you do want to be successful, then you've got to put in that hard work at the end of the day.
Exactly. Like, it's just a typical thing of like talent can only get you so far. And I think it might have been Fraser that said it. It was just like, knowledge isn't power, knowledge and like action is power. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually applying it and raising to somebody's standard. But another thing that Tony was talking about as well, he said like, understands that your actions kind of have to align with your vision. So if you wanted to be, I mean, I've basically already said it, but like, if you had a vision of being a business owner, all right, you need to align your action to the standards to meet that with business owner. You couldn't be somebody who's kind of like just laid back, chilled, a bit half-assed and just run a business, right? It just wouldn't work.
100%. Discipline, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So the major reason that raising your standards is so hard is due to self-limitations. So people might say like, oh, I'm not the kind of person that goes to the gym. All right, when did you suddenly decide that you're not a gym person, right?
And who told you that?
Exactly. like if you start asking those kind of questions, you'll realize like, at what point did you decide that? All right, it wasn't one day you just woke up and went, I'm not a gym goer. It didn't happen like that. It happened over time. And it's just like, it's a gradual thing that you start to believe with time. And the key thing here is like, you weren't born with that opinion. It's just, you've put that belief on yourself.
Yeah, that's similar to kind of what we talked about in that self-talk podcast, where it's like self-hypnosis. So you ultimately saying that you aren't the person that goes to the gym, or you aren't that person that can start a business, or you aren't that person who can be successful in that certain field. Like you're never going to start if you have that belief, or if you have that self-talk, or if you have those standards. Like, you got to, changing your standards is very similar to how you change the way you see yourself. Like, if you look at yourself and see that you have mediocre standards, not just like how you go about like your life, but you can think about like your standards about how other people, how like people in your kind of circle. So for example, if people come into your circle, if you've got people in your circle that tend to take away your time for their kind of benefit, then like that could show that you have a low kind of standard of yourself, because you show that you're not valuing your time, you're not valuing what you can do with yourself, you're not valuing your routine, you're not valuing your kind of ability to commit. Because like, as we said like previously, talent can only get you so far and technical ability can only get you so far, but it's the amount of time that you put into yourself that is ultimately gonna change your outcome. Because like, I think hard work, you can't succeed like with anything without hard work. It's pretty impossible. It's not, if you're good at something, that doesn't mean that you're just going to get like the riches from doing that. You actually have to apply it in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's pretty hard to actually like admit that your standards aren't good enough.
Yeah.
Like you kind
It's
of
just being honest.
yeah, because you always you never want to be wrong. You never want to be like, oh yeah, like, I'm not doing good enough here. You always kind of say like, oh well,
It's your ego, isn't it? It's your
yeah,
ego.
because of this happened, I wasn't able to do it, something like that. You get
Yeah.
what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's just you've got to remember that, like going back to the example of somebody who says they're not a gym goer, right? You have to remember that you decided that.
Mm-hmm.
You identified as that person, no one else. And if you decided that, then you can also change your mind and say,
Yeah.
I'm a gym goer. So
Exactly.
you
100%.
decide your identification and beliefs. And one thing that kind of like changed my mind quite a lot as well is like, ask yourself, is it a fact or a belief? So is it a fact that you're not the kind of person that goes to the gym? Is it a fact that you can't get a promotion? Is it a fact that you can't change your job? You'll realize most of the stuff is a belief, not a fact.
Yeah, it's like an opinion, isn't it? It's
Exactly.
just it's how you perceive yourself at that time. And most of the reason why people say that they can't do something or why they don't start is because they actually have a lack of experience or success in doing that thing. And ultimately, how do you change that? Well, you take action, you actually do it, and you then gain successes. Well, you take action regardless whether you think you're going to fail or succeed. Like that doesn't matter. It's just the taking action that actually matters. And if you succeed, then yeah, that's success. You get in success experience. Success builds on that. Like you're just, and then your opinion of yourself and your standards will ultimately increase because that's what happens with some people. It's just like one failure experience and they write themselves off straight away. It's just like,
man.
what's the point?
I think there is also something else. I can't remember where I heard now. But it was a term called like paralysis by analysis. It's like
Yeah, exactly. Over
overthink.
analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was basically saying that um, some people will just kind of be like, I'll start it once I do this, and then they'll do that thing, and then they go, actually, I reckon I should do this first, and then I'll start, and then I'll do that thing. And they go,
Yeah.
like, definitely once I do this, I'll get started on that. And it's just, it never happens because you always think like, oh, there's always something more, like I could always be more prepared, but I think if you actually just start doing something, you'll learn a lot quicker.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about taking that first initial step. You think about all the people that were potentially scared to take that first initial step, but then they did, and experiencing the riches. Like you think about, what's his name, Jeff Bezos. It's like he believed full well in the vision that he had for Amazon, and you see all the previous photos of him in his office. He's spray painting the wall Amazon. He didn't even have a sign. He just spray painted his office wall Amazon, and it's just like that is. I think that's sick.
Yeah, it's like 200 billion or something ridiculous like that he's worth now. So
Yeah,
joking it. But basically, like you can raise your standards through routines and rituals as well. And we did a whole podcast on the perfect morning routine. I think it might have been called. So one thing I do is definitely get a morning routine. You'll probably realize basically like anybody or like I don't really like using the term like high achievers, if you can call them that, or like successful people. Basically all of them have a morning routine, and there's a reason behind it. It's because they work, like they get you in the right mood to get stuff done. And once you realize that you can be any kind of person, like going back to that fact or belief, you'll realize that most of the stuff is just your belief. It's not a fact. So once you realize that you can actually do something or be a kind of person, then you can meet that person's standards through their routines and habits, can't you?
Because at the end of the day, you are the product of your habits. So, for example, going back to like the homeless example, it's like their habits is that they take drugs every day, and that's got them in the position that they are. And the opposite end of that, a successful person, a successful footballer, is someone who's dedicated hours into training every day. So yeah, 100%, like habits and routines will shape you as a person. And I think you've got to be honest about looking at that and looking at your habits and seeing, like, for example, probably one of the most kind of detrimental habits that we have at the moment, probably as like in our age group, is the amount of social media that we consume in a day. Like, if you were to limit that to maybe 1 hour a day, you'd realize how much you spend on social media. But unless you don't be honest and start to look at that, then you're never going to know otherwise, because ultimately, if you don't change that and if you don't have a look at like your habits, you'll just keep doing them, and you won't change.
Yeah, I think it's a really, not a quick way, but definitely speeds up the process of getting you where you would want to be. So like, if, say, for example, you wanted to be a business owner, start your own business like that, and you kind of think, right, what's my morning routine looking like now? I wake up, I check my phone, watch YouTube for a bit.
Yeah, wake up at 10, check my
Yeah, go
phone till 11.
downstairs, play Xbox or something.
Yeah.
Think of the routine that a business owner would have. Probably wakes up, maybe he reads for a bit on his industry that he works in. Then he might potentially look for clients, something like
Make
that.
a couple of emails,
yeah, you can do those kind of things. But obviously, you can't send messages or like communicate with your customers yet because you don't have any, but like finding clients, something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
It's that kind of thing that you could implement. And I think morning routine, key. If you do it in the morning, it's first thing done.
Yeah, most of successful people that you see now probably have very similar routines and rituals that they actually do. So as you said, like they get up, like I'd say a lot of successful people get up early. They get up early relatively to the rest of the population. They're acquiring knowledge a lot more through like books. They're doing exercise. They're just doing, I guess they're just doing the simple things that we as a population have kind of, or as a society, sorry, have kind of gone away from, obviously due to like technology, social media, all these sorts of like distractions. Like if you potentially, if you wanted to see your your standards, or where you are in terms of your standards, is literally just go like monk mode and just like just for a week and just see how much of a difference that kind of makes. Like limiting your social media, getting up early, doing exercise, just the fundamental basics, and just see how that differs, and how that kind of helps you, or it makes you happier. I'm not sure, because when I do those sorts of stuff, I do feel happier than when I'm just sitting in bed on my phone all day.
Yeah, definitely. Like it almost seems a bit too simple. Like if you see somebody who's like made a fortune, you're like, what's your morning routine? He just goes, I just
wake up early, I meditate, and I read.
Yeah.
So, there must be more, mate. Come on.
Exactly. You'd expect more.
What's the secret formula?
There's a reason why they do it. Like,
not
just doing it for the sake of it. But that's it for today's podcast. Hope you found this useful. For just kind of like conclude, I'll just go through what we've been through again. So, first thing was who you are right now is the result of the standards that you set for yourself. The reason why you probably find it hard to change your standards is because it's due to self-limitations. So remember to ask yourself, is it a fact or a belief that you have? You'll probably realize it's just a belief. And remember that you decided to identify as the person you are just now. So you can always change your mind. And most of what you think you can and can't do isn't a fact, all right? It is not a fact. It's just a belief. And then the final little thing was just you can raise your standards through rituals and routines. So hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please do subscribe and follow us, whatever platform you're listening on, and we'll see you in the next one.
Peace.